If you've ever stared at your Steam library for hours on end and wondered which games are worth your time, then you've come to the right place. I've reviewed a lot of games in my time, but these were the 6 I've played so far this year that stood out as both particularly enjoyable, but not quite big enough to justify their own video. The first on the list is Recon Breakpoint, and before you click away, let me cook. A lot of people will probably remember Breakpoint as the game that introduced NFT items that would not only tarnish its reputation, but ultimately only generate a rumored $400. This was compounded with a rocky launch, which in light of recent releases, truly made it ahead of its time. It wasn't up until the start of this year when me and a few mates actually decided to give the game a solid shot, and to be entirely honest, I'm not sure why the hell it gets such a bad reputation. This is a polished military RPG, which has such an absurd amount of customization that it's literally able to be all things to all people. Players who want to enjoy a realistic experience with no HUD, a one-shot to kill combat system, and nearly pitch black night times, can tune the game to exactly what they want. Furthermore, the ones of us who enjoy a goofy military sandbox with a few friends will also have a really fucking good time, and it's genuinely baffling to see this game so slept on.
This is my buddy, his name is Stan, and he's a very good boy. Now Stan, come on, I'm gonna go drown you in the lake. I'm so proud of us. Now let's all go drown our friends in the lake real quick.
We're not drowning them, we're baptized.
Yeah, exactly. Oh! There is a plane above us. Yep, no, they forgot about us completely because we're a holy organization. Nothing that we do wrong could be bad.
If you want to play as a sniper, a Sam Fisher style infiltrator, or even a fucking drone operator, you are free to do so, and everything is unlocked at such a blistering pace, meaning by the time you actually understand the game, you're actually playing it the way you want. Classes are different enough to be distinct, but still uniform enough, so you never feel unable to complete an objective, and the skill tree is actually big and significant, meaning you're not chasing useless perks, like 3% extra damage while on fire, and eating a taco. The visual customization is also fucking crazy, and you'll often find yourself spending 10 whole minutes just tuning your outfit to either look like a badass special forces operator, or an absolute fucking clown. People tend to give Ubisoft games a lot of shit for one reason or another, but in Breakpoint, they are just playing to every single strength they have, and if you don't give a shit about the writing, and just want a fun military game for you and your 2 friends, I really can't recommend this much more. Time for the next game. Barotrauma is the most unique title on this list, because much like yourself, I was really fucking skeptical when I first saw the Steam page. Barotrauma places you, and whoever else you can convince to play, on Jupiter's moon of Europa, where civilization has long survived under the ocean, cut off from those who still live on the Earth. You are all submarine crew members, who must work together for survival, and I cannot stress the need for cooperation more highly.
$150.
150 and 100.
You guys are getting paid?
Every member of a submarine will take on a specific role in the crew, whether that be a medic, a security officer, a mechanic, or the all-important captain, and each role has players perform very different tasks to keep the sub from leaking. Every class can technically fulfill every duty when push comes to shove, but with everyone getting unique perk trees, it pays to specialize and do what you do best. For example, I've played for just over 50 hours, and I've never played any other role but the engineer. My job, no matter what kind of threat or depths we sink into, was to keep the sub's power online, meaning most of my playthrough was simply spent fixing electrical items and making sure the nuclear reactor was kept online. If the electrical systems go down, the oxygen generators no longer work, the engines shut down, and the onboard weapons no longer fire. This means shit like navigation, security, and medical emergencies were all left to the rest of the crew, and this was exactly the way I liked it.
We have enemies approaching. He's in the captain's hub.
The nuclear reactor was like a fickle lover, and through sheer trial and error, I was able to calculate how to properly balance the energy usage against how much fuel it could handle at once. Not enough fuel, and the sub wouldn't get enough power, but too much, and the reactor could explode, wiping out everyone on board. At times, I would even go as far as to wire the doors to the reactor room shut, because every time someone touched it, half the sub's electrical systems would get fried. The engineer role also specialized in tuning the ship to be more practical, and although my knowledge on the topic was admittedly very basic, it still let the crew enjoy some very welcome improvements. As much as I'd like to talk about navigation or combat, my role as the engineer was entirely devoid of either, and I think it speaks to Barotrauma's appeal of being a hardcore submarine simulator for people who truly want to sink into their role. Not once in my playthrough have I ever actually left the safety of the sub, while other members of the crew have likely spent half their playtime swimming around in the cold, dangerous waters. Barotrauma isn't a game to hold your hand, and even doing something as easy as mixing up a canister of welding fuel and a canister of oxygen can be an easy way to get yourself killed. At some points in the game, you'll just be amazed with how much the developers let you sabotage yourself, as even doing something as simple as having lithium on your person during a hull breach can cause it to explode in your pocket. Another example is that some medical treatments actually cause psychosis, so sometimes your crew members will literally start seeing shit, and they'll have no way of knowing that it's not real. In fact, in most cases, the rest of the crew won't even know if you've been knocked unconscious or killed, as your in-game mic will simply no longer work, and you'll just have to hope another player finds you in time. These systems all accumulate into being a brutal experience without a very well coordinated crew, but it truly does make long missions where you succeed impossible odds so incredibly sweet. But now for something completely different. A game not yet available to play, but still very worthy of the list, is The Finals, a fresh take on a modern team-based shooter, which is brimming with good ideas. The game pits multiple teams of 3 against one another in a large arena map, and dares them to swipe and deposit as much cash as their skills will allow. The format is basically a battle royale in disguise, but it does well to avoid the usual trappings of the genre. Teammates can be revived easily and quickly. There's no point where you're collecting resources or hunting for upgrades, and the game cleverly pushes players to contest certain points of the map, so you're never far from a quick scrap. The trick is that because there are always less deposit points than are teams within the game, there's inevitably always fighting over these key positions, and when you're able to essentially steal all the progress a team has made toward a big cash out, it's almost always worth the risk to push for the top team. The Finals was created by a team of ex-Battlefield developers, and the game certainly feels both confident in its vision, as well as very technically impressive in its execution. Battlefield has always been known for large-scale destructibility, but the Finals cranks this concept up to 11, and lets players rip through buildings like they're tissue paper. There's a big emphasis on being able to heavily fortify positions in the Finals, because at any moment, another team can literally blow the roof off of your building and make you wish you'd placed your trip mines somewhere a bit higher. The game's class system is rather a choice of body type, with medium builds given access to more supportive abilities, light builds having an emphasis on stealth, and heavy builds carrying the biggest weapons and being able to soak up significantly more damage. There are no caps to how your 3-person team sets itself up for success, so you'll often see teams of lightweight English hooligans ready to shank a lad in classic Brixton fashion. Alternatively, you can literally just dump heals into your thickest teammate and watch as they soak up hundreds of shots to the head. During the last beta test, the weapon balance was a joke. The game had more bugs than a melting Snickers bar on the pavement, and the controls felt like you were fucking ice skating. But there's a lot of potential for this game, and I sincerely hope Embark Studios can stick the landing when they're finally ready to release. Of all the games on this list, none of them quite consumed my life like Valheim. This was a game that I saw so incredibly hyped up upon release, but when I played it at the time, I couldn't get through more than a few hours. The appeal was absent, the hook had missed its mark, and the game fell into my peripheral vision until the start of this year. Peer pressured into picking it up again. With people who had played before, I immediately understood the appeal. It was the tale of a Viking community, destined to pick itself up from having nothing but the clothes on their backs, to slowly crafting a thriving town, and taming the mythological world you find yourself inhabiting. Nothing comes easy in Valheim, as collecting even the most basic of resources is an adventure in and of itself. To make a basic ass bronze sword, the player would have had to clear out burial chambers, to get materials for a forge, already beaten the first boss, to unlock the first pickaxe, found and mined both copper and tin, hunted for leather, and then after all of this, the player is seen worthy enough to wield the weakest sword in the game. Every time you swing this thing, you know at the back of your mind that you earned the right to wield it. You cherish its moveset, admire its stats against particular enemies, and you understand its limitations of where it might fail you. If this sounds grindy and repetitive, I wouldn't blame anyone for noping the fuck out right now, but my brain is wired to want constant progression, and Valheim absolutely delivers. Your goal is always to beat the next world boss, but in between you and their hard-fought death is an entire age of technology that you have to develop and master before you're truly ready to progress. You'll find yourself setting up networks of portals to make gathering materials easier, forming entire sailing expeditions to mine a single far-off resource, and developing an attachment to your favorite weapon types, because the world is truly an unforgiving place. Over time, and many hours, you'll see your town slowly grow and evolve, and you'll look back on those early hours of laying the foundations for your house, and be content in the knowledge that you finally made it structurally sound enough to bring your end vision to life. You'll also feel yourself become significantly stronger throughout your journey, and if you ever decide to fight mid-game bosses with your decked out magic weapons, you'll know exactly what I mean. Much like everything on the list today, Valheim is truly better spent in the company of friends, because getting to share every catastrophic failure, every triumphant adventure, and every piece of timber you used to build the roof above your head is just that much sweeter when you have people to share the experience. If you've ever wanted to capture the magic of playing Minecraft again as a kid, then Valheim is about the closest you're going to get, and it currently stands as very likely the best Viking game ever made. I expect most people will have heard of 2014's The Forest, which seemingly blew up overnight, but its sequel seemed to share only a fraction of the time in the limelight. Sons of the Forest takes everything that made the first game great and refined everything it could to improve not only the original concept, but I'd argue, the survival genre as a whole. The game incredibly strikes a balance of being immersive at every opportunity, but knows when to get out of its own way if realism would become the enemy of fun. Inventory management, which is usually the very worst part about any survival game, is now entirely automated, meaning not only is everything in your backpack sorted to be exactly where it needs to be, but instead of having a weight limit, there's simply a limit to how many of the same item a player can carry. As an extension, crafting simply becomes a process of dragging in the ingredients for the desired item before you watch your player character craft it in real time. To build a fire, you literally just place a few broken sticks on the ground and light it on fire, and just making things never became a chore. Of course, other survival games would have the player spend hours chopping down trees or hunting for food, but Sons of the Forest also understands that this process isn't always very interesting. The addition of AI companions will let you delegate all the jobs you'd rather not worry about, so you can instead focus on building your dream base, hunting for treasure, or progressing the game's currently limited story. The game itself isn't necessarily interested in challenging you to a huge degree, and it sure as hell doesn't want to punish the player for making mistakes, but the experience of Sons of the Forest will vary heavily on how many people you take along for the ride. The solo experience will see the player perpetually outnumbered, exploring with nothing but their GPS to keep them company, and struggling for hours to even get a simple cabin up and running. Bring a whole party of friends along however, and all of a sudden the game turns into a fun camping trip. People will take certain jobs around the camp, some might explore, and report back what they found, and you'll tend to build up an impressive base in only a matter of hours. Roaming together, your community becomes the undisputed apex predators on the island, because while the other tribes are arming themselves with rocks tied to a stick, your crew have enlisted the help of Samuel Colt. In this gamer's humble opinion, Sons of the Forest is truly best spent in good company, and by the time the credits roll, you'll probably find yourself closer to those who you brought along for the ride.
Hello, it's me, Graggle.
Graggle! Say your famous line, Graggle!
Graggle, Graggle, Graggle!
This list was originally only intended to be 5 games, but after Jedi Survivor dropped, it would have been a crime to not include it. This game is not only a response to its predecessor, Jedi Fallen Order, but also to all Star Wars media, since Disney bought the keys to the franchise. This is a Star Wars game clearly made by fans of the series, and they undoubtedly understand what people want in a Star Wars video game. Respawn Entertainment notes that Jedi should be strong as hell in most situations, but not too strong as to make Order 66 not make sense. Lightsabers absolutely decimate enemies once their guard has been broken, and it seems as if Disney very wisely reverted their dumb decision to not allow players to hack off the limbs of their enemies. Everything Cal Kestis learns from the previous game is retained in Jedi Survivor, and instead of stripping abilities away from the player, the developers add more moves than you could ever hope to remember. Not only this, but getting to choose between 5 different lightsaber stances just plays to the Star Wars fantasy so fucking well, and the fact that no one can seem to agree on which ones are the best just speaks so well to how well they were designed. In general, I'm not usually a player that gives two shits about collectibles, but Survive made me become a completionist in a way no other game has before. Every new outfit was something that I actually wanted to wear. Every new lightsaber piece added another 10 minutes I wanted to tinker on the workbench, and taking the road less traveled always seems to reward the player for their curiosity. It's no secret that Star Wars has earned a reputation for being hit and miss over the past few years, but the story of Jedi Survivor was genuinely something I didn't expect to have enjoyed this much. The video game format simply allows for so much more screen time for the characters to properly develop, something that often seems lacking from many of the recent films and TV shows. The writers at Respawn could have easily turned these characters into essentially action figures with easy one-liners, but there's just so much care and attention put into these characters and their relationships, and this allowed them to tell a much more nuanced story. Jedi Survivor isn't only the best Star Wars game I've ever played, but it might just be the best piece of Star Wars media ever made, at least since the start of the Disney sequel revival. How they somehow made this enormously ambitious game in only 3 fucking years is fucking absurd, and to this day, Respawn Entertainment has yet to miss a single shot it's ever taken. If you're part of the Venn diagram of people who like Star Wars and people who like video games, playing this game is probably the easiest decision you'll ever make. This concludes today's list of games I think are pretty cool. If this is something you as viewers would like to see more of in the future, feel free to let me know down below. But until next time, have fun and embrace the bullshit.
Been spending most their lives living in the gangster's paradise. Been spending most their lives living in the gangster's paradise. Look at the situation they got me facing. I can't live a normal life I was raised.